Hello everyone, this is MC Deck Discussions, or Marvel Champions Deck Discussions, and I'm AbisMal, and today we're doing another two-deck comparison. This time it's going to be between two Wasp decks. Both are in the pool aspect. We have Gundam Wings here, which is by HeroicSkeleton, and we have Close Encounters of the Deadpool Kind, which is by myself, AbisMal. Okay? So going back to the top again here. So once again, we have Gundam Wings. Now, you might notice that recently I actually covered Close Encounters of the Deadpool Kind. So my focus is actually going to be on Gundam Wings, and Close Encounters of the Deadpool Kind is going to be here so that we can, do the actual comparison of the decks. But otherwise, the focus will be on Gundam Wings, and you can always go back to my other video to see more detailed analysis of Close Encounters of the Deadpool Kind. So for both decks, I play tested them against Claw, Sabretooth, and Magneto, once in Standard, once in Expert, although after I finished playtesting Gundam Wings, I did one more test with Close Encounters of the Deadpool Kind against Expert Magneto because I made a change because of what I saw in Gundam Wings. So that's part of what I'll be pointing out too, is what Gundam Wings inspired for me for my own deck. Both decks will be linked in the description, per usual. And again, I play my deck first to make sure that I'm thoroughly used to the villains and counter decks, Wasp's identity-specific cards, and in that way, when I am looking at Gundam Wings, I can just focus on the differences between the cards that are the aspect cards, in this case pooled cards, and the basic cards. As a quick reminder, I'm happy to create a deck discussion on anyone's deck, play test it, and do a video on it, or I can create a deck for someone per a request, play test that, and do a video on it. Just let me know in the comments what you'd like, and I'd be happy to put something together and go ahead and do my analysis on that. So let's go ahead and go full screen on Gundam Wings here. So let's start with some disclaimers. So first of all, HeroicSkeleton and I chatted ahead of time. So HeroicSkeleton saw my other video and knew that he had created his own deck, or they had created, actually I think I was making an assumption there. They had created their own deck, Gundam Wings, that was also based on pool, and knew there were some definite differences between the decks, and so said that they'd be happy to have me feature their deck on a two-deck discussion video. So that was pretty cool. So we did discuss a few things ahead of time. So first of all, Gundam Wings is meant to be a multiplayer deck. And he does have some notes, or they do have some notes. Well, I did that again. They do have some notes in here about some solo and card swaps. And so we had a discussion in between us about some of those swaps. So I'm going to go ahead to mention that here, but then at the end, I do want, or somewhere in the video, we'll see where it occurs, I'll discuss what I think, what would happen if we changed it back for multiplayer. So there were two cards that were removed. One of them was Plot Convenience. So this is a card, I realize I'm discussing a card that's not going to be in here, but it'll be in here when I go back to the multiplayer discussion. And so that one's a 2-cost support. And you exhaust Plot Convenience, and you can choose to either attach an aspect card from your hand face down here, and the aspect is pool, so it'd be pool aspect cards, or you can add one card attached face down here to your hand. And any player can trigger this ability. Of course, I'm playing this in solo, but that's good to know because if any player could trigger it in multiplayer, that could be powerful, adding other aspect cards to it. So because of some of those limitations in solo, and because it, as far as the speed of, the pacing of getting the deck going, we decided that that we would just go ahead and remove Plot Convenience for the solo plays. In addition, we removed one other card for a similar reason, and that's Specialized Training. With the 5 thwart that it takes to get Specialized Training in play, we removed that one as well. For similar reasons, and for in a solo match, trying to get that 5 thwart is just a little tougher, especially with a deck like this that's not meant for real thwarting on it, not to a large degree in any way, in any case. And then with that, removing 2 cards, that brings the deck down to 40 cards. So notice this is normally a 41 card deck. That brings it down to 39 cards, excuse me. And so I went ahead and added 1 ally into the deck, which is kind of, a little bit more, tends to be more beneficial in a lot of these solo plays. So I went ahead and added in Ironheart, the Ironheart ally, which is a basic ally. So I'll go to, let me go find that ally real fast to show that one off as a reminder. So there's 2 reasons for Ironheart. One is it gives 1 extra card draw it gets when you play it, but also it has a mental resource icon, which is important for a couple of reasons that we'll go into in a little bit. But let me go ahead and find the card to remind people what it is or show people who happen not to know. All right, so here's Ironheart. So notice, yes, it is in basic, mental resource icon, 2 cost, 1 attack, and 1 thwart. And it has a response. After you play Ironheart from your hand, draw a card. Oh, and it has 2 hit points. Right, so that's a card to help with the pacing of the card and to get the cards that you really do want back into your hand to be able to play those. So let's go back to the deck. All right, so that's it. Those were the basic changes. So overall, still, this is meant to be a multiplayer deck. So we'll keep that in mind as we have some parts of the discussion. But let's go ahead and look at which cards. We'll do the thing where we look at similarities, then we'll look at differences. So let's start with the similarities in the decks. And again, I'll just stay on Gundam Wings for those similarities since both decks have these same cards. So first of all, both cards have Moon Girl in it, right? So Moon Girl has the champion and genius trait. You can only play Moon Girl if you have the champion or genius trait. And in this case, Wasp has the genius trait in alter ego form and has this response: after you play Moon Girl from your hand, draw 1 card for each mental resource icon used to pay for her. Hence, that's one of the reasons why Ironheart was chosen, with having that mental resource as a resource in order to play Moon Girl. Other similarities include Nick Fury, who, when you play Nick Fury, can draw you 3 cards. That's the main purpose of Nick Fury anyway. And then there's Professor X, whose main purpose is to confuse the villain. Although there were times when I actually did use Professor X to stun a minion. And then also both decks had some pool allies. And in particular, we did both have Bob, Agent of Hydra. So that ally we both had in common. We also both had Face the Past. So Face the Past has this hero action. First of all, it's a 0-cost event. Search the encounter deck, discard pile, and set aside area for your nemesis minion and reveal it. Ready your hero and draw 3 cards. You cannot attack the villain this phase, so remove this card from the game afterwards. So this is mostly to get that card draw, help to get you more setup in your deck, but also the Nemesis minion, which I'll show in just a minute, is not the strongest of minions and actually can provide some benefits in a couple of ways. So let's go find the Nemesis minion for Wasp. All right, so the Wasp Nemesis minion is Beetle. Is a 1 scheme and 1 attack. So not a lot to worry about just from that standpoint alone. Has guard and also has 4 life. So not a huge amount of life, not the weakest, but not the biggest either. And it has this forced interrupt. So when Beetle is defeated, choose to either spend a physical resource or shuffle Beetle into the encounter deck. So that actually can provide a benefit because Beetle isn't the worst card to have show up again. And, especially when we face against Magneto, there can be some real good reasons to let this just go back into the Nemesis, back into the villain's encounter deck in order to maybe face again instead of some of the stronger cards. So this Beetle ends up being a really good choice for this particular card. So once again, that was for Face the Past. That'll bring Beetle back out. Okay. In addition, we also both have Not My Responsibility in our deck. Has a mental resource icon, costs 0. It's an event, max 1 per deck. Has an interrupt. When any amount of threat would be placed on a scheme, you or your ally takes it as damage instead. So highly beneficial card for protecting you from those schemes. especially surprise schemes, so that you can, not lose the game or not go to the next stage, next main stage for the villain in terms of its scheme, next main scheme, that is. All right, and then we also have, so that's it for the events. And then we both have Genius for the basic resources, and we both have, which one is there it is. And we both have self-control. So notice there actually aren't a lot of commonalities in this part, which is the resources is very often where people have more things in common. But we do both have self-control, which is a pool card, max 1 per deck, and you double the number of resources this card generates, and notice they're mental resources. If your identity has sustained less than 5 damage, you triple those resources instead if you have sustained no damage, which means I'm going to bring us over to another card we both have in common, which is Healing Factor. So Healing Factor is part of how this is an upgrade, 3-cost upgrade, and this is part of how you keep that health up. So Healing Factor, it's a superpower, max 1 per player, and it has the response after the player phase begins, exhaust Healing Factor, you heal 2 damage from your identity. So since it is just a response, that means whether you're on your hero side or on your alter ego side, you get to take advantage of this. In addition, if we stick with the upgrades, we both have Ingenuity in our decks, which is the 2-cost upgrade. And you can only play this if your identity has the Genius trait, so you can only play it while you're in alter ego form, in this case for Wasp. But then it is a resource that you can use whether you're in alter ego or in hero form. You can exhaust Ingenuity, generate a mental resource, which once again helps with Moon Girl. And while I'm thinking of it, we had better look at, we've been talking about these mental resources. Those are especially important because Wasp, in her alter ego form, so Nadia Van Dyne, has the girl action, which is shuffle up to 2 cards with a printed mental resource from your discard pile into your deck. So any of these mental resources can be shuffled back into the deck. And I talked at length about the benefits of that from particular cards. So I'm just going to mention those particular cards again that are super important to get back into your deck in this particular case, especially in solo play. We'll talk again. There's some other things we might want to consider in multiplayer, but overall, these are still the same cards you want to go back, which would be Moon Girl, so you can play in alter ego form and be able to draw 3 cards, as long as you spend at least 3 mental resources for that. Nick Fury is sometimes going to be a choice in order to draw 3 cards. Professor X is often going to be a choice because you're going to want to confuse the villain so that you can actually stay in alter ego form. You're also going to want to put Not My Responsibility back into your deck to protect yourself in alter ego form. And you're going to often put Genius back in as a double mental resource to help you play cards. And as long as you're keeping your health up, you're also going to want to get self-control as a possible double or possible triple resource that's going back into your deck. So those are really the main ones that you would want to put back into your deck. Possibly somebody might stick Quinn Carrier back in, like maybe if you passed it up the first time, or Ingenuity. So those could be possibilities as well, but those aren't really the main ones. The main ones are the ones I mentioned, but there are some attack cards as well, such as Pinpoint Strike, especially this one. So your 3-cost event that allows you, it has a hero action, deal 7 damage to an enemy, but if you're in tiny hero form, which a lot of times you're going to want to be, this deals 1 additional damage to that enemy and gains overkill. But you could also choose to put Wasp Sting in there too, but most of the time it would be Pinpoint Strike or the other cards that I've mentioned. All right, and then we have just the supports to finish up. And so we both have Helicarrier and Quinn Carrier, right? So Helicarrier, exhaust Helicarrier, choose a player, reduce the resource cost of the next card that player plays this phase by 1. And Quinn Carrier is a resource generator, 3-cost support as well. Play only if your identity has the Avenger trait, so you actually have to play this in your hero form initially. And then you can use it. It is a resource though, so you can use it in alter ego or hero form, exhaust Quinn Carrier to generate a wild resource, which is really nice for a couple of purposes, one of them is in order to play Moon Girl, providing that mental resource, but Did I mention we both have stick-to-itiveness? I think I forgot to mention that. So, but we also both have stick-to-itiveness, which is a 2-cost upgrade, max 1 per deck, and it has a hero action, spend a physical resource and exhaust this card, you can ready your hero. So that's an important one too, especially important in this deck. So it was already important, it turned out to be a major factor in my deck, but it's even more important in this deck. So I think it's time to transition to the differences, and we might as well go to that first differences of why why stick-to-itiveness is so important in this particular deck. So that first difference is laser swords. So laser swords is a 3-cost upgrade, counts as 2 restricted cards. So you can't have other restricted cards in here if you wanted like some kind of other weapon. So this is your basically 2 weapons. You know, if you look at the picture here, it's supposed to be 2 laser swords. Like that's why a lot of people end up naming their decks that have these, you know, with Jedi names to it, right? And then your hero gets +1 attack for each, and it's better to stay over here actually because this doesn't have all the icons. So your hero gets +1 attack for each of those various, you know, dangerous icons that are in play, right? So we have the hazard icon. We'll see if I can remember all the names of these. We have the acceleration icon. We have the crisis icon and the amplify icon. We can't really see that very well here, but yes, we also have the amplify icon. So each one of those that is in play gives +1, and it was up to 4. So you can get to up to an extra 4 attack. So Wasp's attack, when she's in the tiny hero form, she has an attack of 1, but so then she would add to that attack. She could possibly get a second attack point from an upgrade that she does have for herself, which is, nope, not that one. Wasp Helmet, there it is. So Wasp Helmet, when you're in tiny hero form, you get +1 attack. So she can have 2 attack on her own. And then when you're in giant hero form, you get +1 thwart. But most of the time when you're attacking, you do want to be in the giant hero form instead. So let me go find that card. So when you're in giant hero form, you have 2 attack, but that's not the real, that's nicer, of course. So this 2 attack could go all the way up to as much as 6 attack. But even just with one of those kind of dangerous icons in play, you're at 3 attack. A couple of them, you're at 4 attack. Even at 4 attack, this becomes impressive. And here's why. The damage you deal using your basic attack can be divided among enemies as you choose. So it's really cool to do 4, 5, or 6 attack and spread that out. And because you have stick-to-itiveness, you can ready again and do another attack for just as much. In addition, Wasp does have another card, which is this one right here, an event card called Rapid Growth. She has 2 copies of this. It costs only 1, and basically you play this when you're in tiny hero form, and it has a hero interrupt. When you use one of your basic powers, whether it's a thwart, attack, or defense, in this case we want to focus on the attack most of the time, change to your giant hero form and get +2 to that power for this use. So now you can add even 2 more. So you can have, you know, you take your 3, 4, 5, or 6 attack and add 2 more to that. So so that becomes even more powerful, at least for that one use, right? When you ready yourself again with stick-to-itiveness, you lose that +2, but temporarily you get that +2 attack. And once again, you're not limited to attacking just one enemy. You can spread that out to whomever you choose. Maybe get rid of a tough token on one of the enemies. Defeat one enemy, defeat one minion, maybe defeat another minion and leave a little bit of attack for the villain as well. So there are lots of possibilities there, and it's very powerful. So I usually found that card wouldn't come out right away in the game because it was more important to control the board in the beginning. So getting out some allies, getting things set up was more important. But as the game progressed, that card would come out and start to become a major factor. And especially at the end of the game, time and time again, for the victories with Gundam Wings, those came at the hands of the enhancement of the laser swords to Wasp's attack. Wasp's basic attack. All right, so let's look at some of the other differences in this deck. So first of all, my deck had, I believe, like 4, I'm pretty sure it was 4 of these pool characters. I'll go back and check that in just a little bit. But this deck had Negasonic, Teenage Warhead. So that one was substituted out, but this is a good time to say why I substituted out for solo play, but it would come back in multiplayer play where it's not nearly as dangerous, but has more benefits, or the benefit is better. In essence. So it's a 4-cost ally with Psionic and X-Force as the traits, and it has this interrupt. When a treachery is revealed, deal 2 damage to Negasonic Teenage Warhead. Cancel that treachery's when revealed effects. Now, of course, the bad part is it has this hazard icon, so you end up getting dealt an extra encounter card. So that makes things extra dangerous. But she has a way to kind of make up for that. When you're in multiplayer, having 1 extra card isn't as big a deal. When you're in solo, that's a pretty big deal. And if the extra card that comes up isn't a treachery, if it's a really difficult minion or some other thing that's really dangerous, then that's not a treachery, then this doesn't do a whole lot of good to deal Negasonic Teenage Warhead can't cancel it. So decided to change that out, but this could be a really good card with that consistent 2 thwart and 2 attack. And as I mentioned in the previous video, there is no consequential damage for these pool allies. So these card can stay out here forever and consistently be canceling these when revealed effects on the treacheries, or at least 2 of them, because she has 4 life, so she could get away with doing that twice. But again, wasn't in my deck, but good to mention, because we are going to talk about multiplayer a little bit. Another difference in this deck is that it has Symbiote Suit. Frankly, it wasn't really a difference for my play. I actually never ended up getting Symbiote Suit out once. It ended up being too dangerous in some instances, and other instances it just was never convenient. But I might as well talk about that card because it could have been a benefit. There are definitely times when I could have used it and it could have been a benefit. It just didn't come up at the right time in order to use it. So it's max 1 per deck. It's a 4-cost upgrade. Your identity gets +1 to each of its basic powers, which of course is could be very strong, and +1 hand size and +10 hit points. But once again, has this hazard icon on it. The benefit of that being, of course, that your laser swords can also benefit from that extra icon. And it could have been very strong in solo. It just never ended up being, like I said, it was never a convenient time for me to use that. I had other priorities when I was playing, or it just didn't happen to come up in my hand at times when it could have been a good priority to make. And once again, in multiplayer, that's another thing that extra hazard is less of a cost, but at the same time has more benefit. Or I should say has the same benefits, but for less of a really cost when you're playing with multiple players. All right, some of the other differences on the resources. So in my card, I have the traditional 2-cost cards. You have your Genius, which is the one that has 2 mental resources. Mine also had Strength, that has the 2 physical resources, and it had Energy, which has the 2 energy resources. Is that what they're called? I think so. That's what I'm thinking right now. And instead of those, this one has the Power in All of Us, which can help benefit with the wild resources, which can be treated as mental resources. So that can benefit in continuing to play Moon Girl when you're in alter ego side. All right, and then another difference here is the card Get in Front of Me. Again, I think this is better as a multiplayer card. Probably should have switched this out, I think, and maybe put in another ally. This never ended up being convenient to use at all when I was playing solo, but didn't really know ahead of time that was really going to be the case. But it has this hero interrupt. When a treachery card is revealed from the encounter deck, cancel its when revealed effects. The villain attacks you instead. If an ally or another hero defends this attack, you can draw a card. So you can see where that could be a real benefit, and it could come up to be a lot more handy. And we're going to discuss why that why it is more likely to have a real impact in multiplayer right now because of the other major difference, and that is Mulligan. So Mulligan is a really awesome card, not quite as awesome all the time in solo. And here's why. So first of all, here's what's really cool about Mulligan, right? It's a 3-cost card. You cannot play this card if you played any other card this phase. Oh, actually, I do need to talk about one more card, Tic-Tac-Toe. So in the upgrades, the 0-cost upgrade, Tic-Tac-Toe, this is important for when I'm coming back to talk about Mulligan. So you have a hero action, spend 1 resource of any type. You can move 1 damage from a character to an empty space above, so one of these empty spaces here, and matching the spent resource. If there are 3 damage tokens in a row, so like Tic-Tac-Toe, then you discard this card. You deal all damage on this card to an enemy and discard this card. So you could do as little as 3 damage, but as much as, I think it's 8. I'm not remembering for sure, but you can work this out. Yeah, you could get 6, I guess 7, right? So you can get up to 7 damage, I'm pretty sure. Somebody can correct me on that if I'm wrong. And then you would discard this card. So, but it can help heal some allies or your hero. But the reason that becomes important is because this Mulligan, so coming back to this card, so this is a 3-cost card. You cannot play this card if you have played another card this phase, and it has this action, discard your hand, draw a new hand. So first of all, you can't play a card, but you can use resources, cards in your hand as resources. So you could use them for Tic-Tac-Toe. You could also use them for Stick-to-itiveness to generate a physical resource, if that's available, and you can ready your hero that way. So it can be used, those can be used as resource sinks prior to using the ability on Mulligan. So what's really cool about Mulligan and drawing a new hand? Well, you're more likely to get the cards that you really want in your hand. So you have more of a chance to get Moon Girl, Nick Fury, Professor X. Maybe you're hoping to get Not My Responsibility. All these really great. Oh, and your attack cards like Pinpoint Strike, even Rapid Growth. Maybe you need or Wasp Sting, for some more damage. Or maybe you need something like, where'd it go? Or Giant Help. You need some more threat removal. So you have all these better chances of getting the cards that you really want. So that's a real benefit if you can go to alter ego side a lot and keep putting those cards back in your deck. So let's talk about the gameplay where this leads up to. So this was really, that was an excellent benefit. And this was the first time I actually really saw Mulligan having a real benefit. Whenever I tried to use Mulligan in my decks in the past, it never really provided the benefit I was hoping for. I just never ended up using it. I had other cards I was using. And it wasn't until I started playing this deck that I realized, oh, if you're playing a deck with the Genius trait and you're able to get Moon Girl out regularly, then a card like Mulligan is really great for getting Moon Girl back into your hand again, getting Nick Fury back in your hand again. And with Wasp's alter ego ability, the girl action, shuffle up to 2 cards with a printed mental resource from your discard pile into your deck. If you're going to alter ego all the time, then you can keep getting those awesome cards back into your hand, playing them again, getting more and more card draw. So first of all, that's fantastic in multiplayer. And with this deck, a lot of times it's still really good in solo. And that was the case when I was playing against, let's go back to our 3 villains that I mentioned before. So we have 3 villains. There was Claw that we played in Standard and Expert. This was really good against Claw because we would use Professor X to confuse Claw. We would use Not My Responsibility as a safety in order to prevent Claw from being able to thwart when necessary. So it worked really well in Claw. So I got to see the true effectiveness of Mulligan. It worked a little less well in Sabretooth is the villain that can keep healing itself, but you still do want to go to alter ego side fairly often with Professor X. But I did find I had this one marathon match in Expert, which you can sometimes have with sometimes have when you're facing Sabretooth, because Sabretooth is healing himself constantly. And so I did have this really long drawn out battle with Sabretooth, partly because it was hard to get everything in place because Sabretooth actually was drawing really good cards all the time. And so it was hard to get the kit built out, because that is what you really want to do first before you go for defeating the villain and going for those pinpoint strikes for big attacks. So I had this majorly long battle against him, but overall the Mulligan was still pretty effective, even against him in expert. The trouble I went through with Mulligan was when I faced Magneto. So Wasp did defeat, so this deck, so HeroicSkeleton's deck, Gundam Wings, which, by the way, if you're not familiar with Gundam Wing, it's like an anime show. I think it's anime. Somebody can correct me on that. I'm not sure which genre. I don't follow those genres myself. But it's kind of cool. This Gundam Wing idea is that you're building a robot out of Wasp. So if you read the description here, it's pretty cool what's going on. And so some of you might know more about that series. But it's pretty cool to read up on that. So in any case, Wasp did handle very well both Claw and Sabretooth. Like I said, it was a marathon match, but it's not like I felt like I was in any danger when I was facing Sabretooth with this Gundam Wings deck. So when I ran into trouble was when I went to go face Magneto. Magneto can keep you on the defensive a lot, and you can end up in hero form for a long time just trying to defend yourself and not having a real opportunity to go to alter ego side. And so Mulligan, I couldn't really get Mulligan to get these cards back, the allies back, in order to defend myself, because that constant bombardment of attacks or extra minions that were constantly being played. And so I could never get the upper hand. And on top of that, both times, both on standard and expert when I was playing with Gundam Wings, I drew that card that you hate to draw when you're playing in the pool deck, which is Crisis of Infinite Deadpools. And I am actually thinking about house ruling that card and not using it when I do these two deck comparisons. So normally I like that card if I'm not facing a villain that's super hard, Crisis of Infinite Deadpools, because it brings out, Dreadpool, which I'll show you in a sec. So I normally don't mind that too much, but when you're facing a really difficult villain, that's an especially hard challenge. And if I'm doing a two deck comparison, if one deck draws that card, in this case, Gundam Wings, and then the other deck doesn't, then it's not very easy to do the real comparison, because once those cards come out, if you're facing a really difficult villain like Magneto, it's more like it's kind of like not a ticking bomb, but kind of a time countdown. It's like a countdown that eventually you're just going to lose because you just can't deal with everything being so overwhelming. So for those who don't know, let me go ahead and show you Crisis of Infinite Deadpools and what it brings out. Okay, so here's Crisis of Infinite Deadpools. When revealed, reveal the set-aside Dreadpool minion and Dreadful Deeds side scheme. Shuffle the rest of the set-aside Deadpool encounter set into the encounter deck. Remove the card from the game. So it's kind of like having an extra Nemesis minion. But here's that Nemesis minion. It's Dreadpool. And Dreadpool is a 2-scheme, 2-attack, has 2 scheme and 2 attack, and 3 hit points. Dreadpool engages the first player, and of course, if you're solo, it engages you. When defeated, deal Dreadpool to the player who defeated him as a face-down encounter card. And in other words, you face him all the time, again and again and again. And there's only like one real lucky way that you can get rid of him, which I've only ever had happen once in all the times I've played. And so just having to deal with that extra thing against a really difficult villain just made it so it was unmanageable. So I did, in fact, lose with both games, standard and expert, against Magneto, partly because this was out, but partly because of that other issue that I just mentioned, which is that Mulligan can't really get your allies back if you can't put them back into your deck, because you can't get down to alter ego side. So that made it so that this deck couldn't really handle that in a solo capacity. that's where I want to transition over to multiplayer. In multiplayer, though, if you can, and I mentioned this before, but I want to say it one more time. If you can constantly go down to alter ego side, and if in multiplayer, of course, you'd want to arrange that with your other players so that you can do that all the time, you can constantly get Moon Girl, Nick Fury, Professor X, and any of the other cards that you want back into your deck, and then mulligan, and you get to mulligan on your alter ego side, drawing you 6 cards instead of 5 cards, and you're likely to keep getting these awesome cards back in your hand, drawing lots of cards, and including, of course, your pinpoint strikes and dealing lots of damage whenever you go over to the hero side. And so somebody else will have to really speak to that as to what that happened. That's my prediction as to what would happen, since I don't play multiplayer. Heroic Skeleton might even chime in the comment section to mention that this is actually true of what I'm saying, but I'm guessing that has to be true. And so in multiplayer, this has to be a super strong, fun deck to play. So I would recommend this deck for multiplayer. And it can be adapted for solo if you're not facing a villain that's like Magneto. Magneto is a bit frustrating to play with this deck. And then for solo, but like I said, solo, this deck is still great for other types of heroes that you might want to face and try it out against. And if you make enough adaptations, you might be able to just remove the mulligans and put in some allies, and then all of a sudden you have a deck that would probably work fine. But otherwise, you might want to just go ahead and try out my deck if you're playing solo, whether against any type of villain, and see how that works out. So it did have luck. Oh, so with that in mind, I did say there was one change I made. And that change is, in my deck, I switched out one card, and I'll have to figure out what card that is, but I'll go look at my deck now, and I put in these laser swords, because these laser swords are awesome. Oh yes, so what I removed from my deck was the Deadpool core ship, and I put in the laser swords. And I actually have that note right here. At the top, I edited my deck description. And it says to replace Deadpool core ship with laser sword. So if you go to my deck, you'll see it here, but you'll see that change right at the very top to make that switch, because those laser swords are just very powerful. And in my deck, it's actually relatively easy to start getting those extra icons out that make laser swords powerful, because I have 4 of these cards, these pool allies, to help make that happen. And so it ends up being a little bit easier. And one of the coolest things, and one of the reasons why I really love this, so for instance, when playing against Magneto, so I said I played Magneto again in Expert, ended up defeating Magneto, and I did in fact defeat him with some attacks at the end using stick-to-itiveness and the laser swords to finish him off. And what was really neat is usually you really dread getting that acceleration token, because Magneto can really plow through his deck quickly. I ended up getting 2 acceleration tokens on Magneto, and they just benefited me by adding to my attack. So I was able to help defeat Magneto with those acceleration tokens that he added to his main scheme. So in any case, that's it for today's comparison. Really awesome. Like I said, I highly recommend the other deck. So first of all, my deck, Close Encounters of the Deadpool Kind, go ahead and give that a try if you're playing solo. I think this deck would be strong too in multiplayer, but frankly, I do think it would be more fun to try the other deck in multiplayer instead. So trying out Gundam Wings. So I hope you like this deck comparison, and I'll talk to you next time. Be sure to like and subscribe, help the channel grow if you like this type of material, these type of videos, and I hope to see you again next time.